Hi, welcome to Harlem Stories. This is Adam Feinberg, your host. I am a real estate agent and I love the Upper Manhattan neighborhoods and got a little bit of a history background. Not a historian, but at the same time, enjoy imparting knowledge that I think others will find interesting. So today our episode is on Hudson Heights, dropping views without the extreme cost. So we're going to talk about this sub neighborhood of Washington Heights. Hudson Heights is generally considered the area west of Broadway, north of the GW Bridge, either at 179th Street or 181st Street, though I've heard some people consider the border as far south as 173rd Street. So obviously that southern border is in contention over here. The dividing line between Fort George and Hudson Heights is Broadway. So that east to west border is much clearer than that southern border. And the name was created by the Hudson Heights Owners Coalition in the 1990s to promote co-op sales with largely Art Deco designs with residential character along with proximity to both the Hudson and Fort Tryon Park. Some Washington Heights neighborhoods don't approve of this sub-neighborhood designation as snooty. I feel like the real estate agent world, the agents out there have taken over this little sub neighborhood, and but I do feel like it definitely feels like a distinctly different neighborhood from the areas around it. So I do think that despite being an agent and having a little agent bias there, it definitely has a different feel to it and is worthy of it. So within it, there's Fort Washington Park, and as a common theme in northern Manhattan, this park is named after Fort Washington from the Revolutionary War. Remnants of the actual Fort Washington can be found at the original site of Bennett Park, which also holds the distinction of highest natural point in Manhattan. There is a plaque there, as we come to expect, as we see all these historical components within Manhattan itself. So the park itself is located along the Hudson from 155th Street, which is like the Washington Heights border, to Dyckman Street to the north, which is like the inward Washington Heights border. And so much of the park is a narrow sliver of land, and it widens a bit near the GW Bridge with the Hudson River Greenway for pedestrians and cyclists. As you head further north, Fort Washington remains along the Hudson River to Route 9A, Henry Hudson. But from 190th Street along the opposite side of 9A is Fort Tryon Park. So it's like one park after another. But within this over here is the Little Red Lighthouse. It's the last remaining lighthouse in Manhattan, and there's even a children's book based on the lighthouse called The Little Red Lighthouse and the Great Gray Bridge. Since the GW and its brilliant lights and 600-foot towers overwhelmed the lighthouse, it was decommissioned, abandoned, and it was slated for demolition. But when the demolition was announced, thousands of children who loved the book started a nationwide campaign to save the Little Red Lighthouse. In part of their efforts, ownership of the lighthouse was transferred from the Port Authority to the New York City Department of Parks and Recreation. Today, visitors can climb a long iron stair to the top of the tower, where the lantern room is again filled with a working lens that blinks at barges and passenger ships sailing under the bridge. So I love stories like this, but the Parks Department relinquished a parcel of land along 179th Street for construction of the GW Bridge, which is one of the longest suspension bridges in the world. And furthermore, there within the park, there's Inspiration Point. It's a popular rest stop for cyclists with amazing views of the Hudson, the Palisades, and the GW Bridge. And Palisades being the cliffs across the on the New Jersey side and into the Rockland County, New York side, where I actually grew up, along with the excuse me, with views of the GW Bridge. A boat marina was opened at the north end of the park at Dyckman Street in 1995. The marina has a fishing pier and a restaurant. There's also Fort Tryon Park, and it was purchased in January 1917 by John D. Rockefeller Jr. And a few months later, he announced that Fort Tryon Park would be given to the city on the condition that it join the existing Fort Washington and Riverside parks. Not that this isn't at all confusing, but just imagine like just interconnecting one park after another, and that the city maintains it. So that was part of the other requirement. In 1921, the city acquired 30 acres of land to connect the two park sites. The south end of the park starts at 190th and goes to Dykeman to the north. Fort Tryon Park runs adjacent to Fort George Park, separated by the highway. This was also known as the Tryon Hall Estate, owned by C.K.G. Billings and a few others. Now, the archway to the Billings mansion, to the estate, it still exists in the park and can be fun to hunt down. So pretty cool walk, and like all of a sudden you see this, this archway entrance. John D. Rockefeller bought this land with the expectation that this be a park, and the design of the park was by the Olmsted brothers, the same Olmsted that designed Central Park, Riverside Park, and so many others. Rockefeller also bought sculptor George Gray Bernard's collection of medieval art and gifted it to the Metropolitan Museum of Art, and built the cloisters within the park to house the collection. The museum was on a steep hill with upper and lower levels with medieval gardens with a series of chapels and themed galleries. The design of the layout is intended, it was intended to solve a sense of medieval European monastic life. And ultimately, I learned in all this, and I kind of knew, but I didn't know how many. The museum holds about 5,000 works of art and architecture, all European, mainly from the 12th to 15th centuries. Information about the cloisters is so voluminous that an entire episode will be needed to discuss the museum. Now, back to Bennett Park, which I briefly mentioned earlier over there, named for James Gordon Bennett Sr., the newspaper publisher who launched the New York Herald in 1835 on land he purchased in 1871. It's the highest natural point in Manhattan, at 265 feet above sea level. And the site of Old Fort Washington and the park host events including a Revolutionary War reenactment, in which the Redcoats and George Washington's army converge and fight in the park, reenacting the Battle of Fort Washington. And, from a transportation standpoint, the 181st Street A train is accessible across from Bennett Park. Now, housing, condos, co-ops, townhouses, etc. So the commonalities in the offering over, within Hudson Heights, there's Castle Village. It's on 7.5 acres of manicured grounds. It's set on the highest bluff, about 200 feet above sea level, above the Hudson River. And the complex has 5 buildings in total, designed by George Fred Pelham Jr., and you'll hear that name very frequently all throughout New York City architecture, certainly uptown quite a bit. But 8 out of the 9 apartments on each floor within Castle Village have river views. So, these do sell for a premium for the neighborhood for that very reason. The other really cool, interesting, larger development in the neighborhood is Hudson View Gardens in Hudson Heights, designed by... now, not to be at all confusing, it was the father, designed by George F. Pelham Sr. Now, I mentioned Castle Village, which was by his son, and Hudson View Gardens was by the father. And designed by George Frederick Pelham in the Tudor architectural style, built in 1924 as one of the oldest continuing running co-ops, owner-occupied since it opened. Hudson View Gardens is set in a beautiful gardens with an English setting garden, private picnic terrace overlooking the river. And there's even a penthouse apartment available to rent for overnight guests. And then finally over here, there's not a whole lot of townhouses in Hudson Heights. But one of the rare freestanding homes over here in a very famous residency is the Pumpkin House. It's a 1920s, 17-foot wide, 6-bedroom townhouse cantilevered from a 250-foot cliff above the Henry Hudson Parkway, and it's located at 16 Chittenden Avenue, where the windows form the look of a pumpkin from the Hudson where there's if you have a Hudson, where it has an orange hue. So obviously called the Pumpkin House for good reason. But yeah, I just wanted to, highlight this, this great neighborhood within Upper Manhattan, a sub neighborhood of Washington Heights. But Hudson Heights has got these amazing views, from the highest point in Manhattan. And, it creates a great opportunity if buyers are, willing or able to, to live, in the 170s, 180s, 190s. It really creates a fabulous opportunity. But again, thank you for for joining me in the Harlem Stories, and we hope to have lots of great episodes for you going forward. But thank you very much. Have a great day, and join us for the next episode.